All right, good morning, everyone. I'm showing 9 a.m., so I think we should go ahead and get started. This is Matt Kelly, the Deputy CISO for Policy and Governance at DIR, and you all are truly blessed today because you don't have to listen to just me talk. I have with me our RSA, Archer Professional Services consultant, Rayne, who will be providing a demo of the configurations that we've been working on over the last several weeks. But first, I want to go over some brief information about the portal itself and some of the applications. First and foremost, some housekeeping. The presentation portion of this webinar will be recorded, same as we did for the other ones, and we'll make the session available along with the slides through our website after adding captions to it. So it may be a few days after, but we will post that as soon as possible. We are also developing some guidance that we'll be able to use for reference whenever you're going through these, so you don't have to rely entirely on this demo or the presentation. We will be answering the questions after the presentation, but feel free to type those into the Q&A pane at any time. We've got some staff moderating those in the background, and we'll try to get to those going forward. And then as a reminder, the source or the location for the resources relating to the Texas Risk and Authorization Management Program can be found at the URL posted on the bottom of this slide. So today's agenda, this webinar is really going to focus on the SPECTRIM component of it and less on the actual program manual and the structure of the program. If there are questions relating to that, we do have webinars that went over the programmatic aspects of StateRAMP that are available on demand. And as always, we can answer questions. So we're going to talk about some of these new applications that go into the activities relating to StateRAMP. One of that is the StateRAMP assessment request application, and then we have an engagements application, third-party profile, and there are several other questionnaires, questionnaires applications and subforms that are available to assist you with your security programs, but we're going to focus more on the StateRAMP aspect of that today. And then we're going to do the walkthrough. Rayne is going to do the walkthrough rather, and then we can have some time for Q&A. I'm not sure if it will take the whole hour and a half, but we will march along and see how far we get. So the program manual, just a reminder as always, if you have questions relating to what is in scope, what is out of scope, we have set forth some direction within the program manual regarding which cloud services require certification, as well as how to evaluate a cloud service for what the minimum certification level is. So we've gotten several questions around, is this applicable or is this in scope? And DIR doesn't really have the full context that the agencies have in that regard. So when you're making these determinations on the impact level or the minimum level for certification for a cloud service, that's a discussion that you need to have with your internal stakeholders, your legal counsel, management, for the areas that aren't necessarily as clean cut, to make those determinations and interpret it based on the statute as well as the program manual definitions. So I just want to put that disclaimer out there. We may not be able to say definitively whether or not something is or is not in scope without the full context. So it's an organizational kind of approach to that. All right, so now I'm going to jump into the SPECTRIM components of it. So what is SPECTRIM actually going to be used for relating to StateRAMP? So the agency request for provisional sponsorship, if you recall that, an agency that has previously conducted a risk assessment on a given cloud service and wishes to sponsor that cloud service for the provisional certification may do that by submitting that notification to DIR or the request to DIR. So that is what the StateRAMP assessment application is there for. And Rayne will show you some more of the details around that. Agency requests for full StateRAMP assessments additionally. So if something already has a provisional certification, or if you just want to outright launch assessment, level 1 or level 2, SPECTRIM is the mechanism by which agencies can request that information. Now, obviously, we will need a vendor contact, and we will have to be able to communicate with that vendor to let them know that an assessment is upcoming, but agencies can request assessments through SPECTRIM as well. We are also going to be providing a report that lists all of the cloud service or the StateRAMP assessments on cloud services that are in process or in queue. So if you are a member of the appropriate permission groups, you'll be able to see the services where they're at kind of in the process, if an assessment's been launched or if it's just been requested, as well as the provisional certifications and the full certifications. Reviewing assessment and reporting content or continuous monitoring content. So again, based on permission groups, we're making available some of the assessment response materials so that if you are contracting for a given cloud service, you'll be able to see that once that cloud service has been certified. And then maintaining an inventory of third-party engagements. This kind of ties into the agency side of things as well with the third-party risk management solution. You can capture your third-party engagements, whether it's a cloud engagement or just a traditional third-party engagement. So there's an inventory capability within there that supports contract documentation and several other connected applications. That's not to say that that's a requirement or we're trying to necessarily replace that. It's just kind of an added benefit to our primary use of leveraging the third-party risk management components for StateRAMP. So that's basically the gist of what is the actions that take place within SPECTRIM regarding StateRAMP, but who actually needs an account? So there have also been some questions around, do my purchasers need an account or do my procurement staff need an account? And that's not necessarily true. Not everyone's going to need a SPECTRIM account. If you're handling the actual requests for assessments, or if you're part of the security team that may review assessment responses after it's been certified, then potentially you could need an account. But we will be posting the certified cloud services on our public-facing website. So it's not necessary that every person that goes through a purchasing process or has to look up whether or not something is certified needs an account. An account request should be performed using the support request function by an existing user or through a request by the agency information security officer. As always, we want to make sure that we are managing access appropriately and that the staff are being granted accounts with the appropriate authorizations from your security folks. So staff that will be submitting requests for StateRAMP assessments and requests for provisional certification through the agency sponsorships are those that will likely need accounts in this scenario. Now, with that, we also created a new access group that is targeted specifically on StateRAMP in the cases where you do want to add potentially somebody from outside of the security office an account so that they can manage this process on behalf of your organization. And that is called the Procurement Access Group. And I just wanted to take this time to also refresh everyone's memories about the primary group permissions that we have in the system. The first is general user, which is allocated to anybody that has an account. And that is largely the group that only permits that user to see the records that they have been assigned to, with the exception of the policy records. But that is a very restricted group to where if somebody was assigned a risk assessment or something along those lines, they would only see that piece that they were assigned to. The next one is the Information Security Office, and this is access to the security related solutions or applications. So security plan template, your risk management, your risk assessments, the third-party solution, and so on. And then the incident group, which limits to just the incident and monthly incident reporting systems. And then the IRM group is for the IT-related reporting side of the house. So that's the IRDR, the APM and PCLS, and then some asset inventory applications. And then the new one here is procurement, and this will permit access to just the third-party applications that are relating to StateRAMP records. So not all of the agency engagements, but only those that are designated as StateRAMP, as well as the ability to request StateRAMP assessments and the agency sponsorship for provisional certification. All right, so the key applications we're going to focus on here today. The first one is the third-party profile application, and this is essentially an inventory of vendors. This is a read-only application, so we have done some background work to populate a list of third parties, and we want to keep this as clean as possible so that there aren't a ton of duplicates within there to assist with reporting, as well as making sure that folks can click on the appropriate vendor if they need to make an association between their organizations. So if a vendor does not exist, agencies can submit a request to have that vendor added to it, and Rayne can walk you through that process. But basically, we are starting with the FedRAMP vendors, the StateRAMP vendors, vendors from our cooperative contracts, and a few others sources that we've identified to go forward with that. So again, this is meant to be read only, but at the same time, we can update that information going forward. But we needed a place to start in order to map out the cloud services to a given vendor. So the next one up is engagements. And this is, I guess you can think of it as kind of a level down from the third-party profile. And this is an inventory of your services or any sort of contract. It doesn't necessarily have to be cloud services, but that's what we're focusing on today. So a given provider could have multiple cloud services, and there are two types of engagements in this regard. One is an agency engagement, so that's directly agency created. It may have absolutely nothing to do with StateRAMP, but you want to keep track of how many contracts you have with vendor XYZ. That will be obviously restricted to your organization's view. And then the StateRAMP engagements are where we will be actually posting the certification status of a given cloud service through that mechanism. So the StateRAMP engagements will be available or visible to other organizations throughout the system as that is the StateRAMP certification. However, again, you can associate that with your organization to get the access to the response information going forward. So you can have multiple engagements for a given third party, and you can have your own engagements for a given third party as well as the StateRAMP ones. And then the other key application we're going to talk about today is the StateRAMP assessment requests. And this is really the bread and butter of how to get started with that provisional sponsorship, as well as make sure that your requests are in queue and that we can prioritize them appropriately to make sure that they are completed in a timely fashion. So these are just screenshots from the application, but we can dive deeper into that through the demo process. All right, so bulk sponsorship import. In some cases, agencies may have a need to import multiple cloud services at one time rather than clicking through and one by one to make sure that they submit their sponsorship request. So if this is the case, then you can reach out to us, and we have developed a template to assist. So we provide that template, you can fill it out and send it back to us, and then we can do a bulk import. Now, this is really only should be used for a large number of records, like probably more than 15. But also at the same time, I really want to highlight this third bullet here, that provisional certification is valid for 18 months from the date it is granted. So you should take into consideration your contracting timeframes as whether or not a provisional certification or sponsorship for provisional certification is appropriate up front like that, or if you could wait longer to sponsor it, or it's really up to you. I just want to make that point known that the 18 months goes into effect from the date of that initial provisional certification is granted to the service. So again, this is meant for a large number of records, but if you want to leverage the process, feel free to reach out and we can provide you that template or talk about the best approach to how to go forward with that. Okay, and then I also just wanted to highlight quickly the StateRAMP and FedRAMP component of this, as those are going to be the ones that are just outright certified due to their status through StateRAMP and FedRAMP. And again, those are the verified offerings, the ones that have been 3PAO assessed. So we've gone through and mapped the StateRAMP authorized vendors list and the FedRAMP marketplace to the StateRAMP levels, and we will have those certified whenever we open it up for everybody to view. So those ones will be on there automatically. And again, if your vendors are seeking authorization status through either of these programs, we will certify them under StateRAMP for the corresponding level of certification. The progressing offerings are not going to be outright certified as those are still in process, but when they do actually achieve the verified offering status, then we will obviously update our inventory to reflect that on a continual basis to make sure that they are certified or certified within our records. Okay, so with that, I am going to turn it over to Rayne, and we will address the rest of the questions at the end of the session. So Rayne, do you want to share your screen?
Hi, yes. Hopefully I'm sharing my screen.
Yep.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. As Matt mentioned, my name is Rayne. I am a senior consultant that is primarily responsible for the implementation and operation of the SPECTRIM portal. So I've been working hand in hand to develop a StateRAMP assessment and StateRAMP request form that will enable the agencies to have a quick line to DIR to request these contracts as they're coming due, and also to provide the most user-friendly approach to vendors. So as Matt mentioned, we have created a new group called the Procurement Group. This group has a very limited amount of access. The only thing that they can see in the portal is the support request application and then StateRAMP related applications. So they won't see any security related items or anything else that may clutter up their view and potentially add confusion. So upon logging in as a procurement user, as well as any other general user, you'll see a StateRAMP bar on the top screen. If you don't see this, there may be an ellipses that you'll click and should be able to find it there. At this point, you'll be able to find a few different things. Across the top, you can create a new StateRAMP assessment request. So if you're looking for DIR to intake and conduct a full assessment, or if you would like to sponsor a vendor for provisional certification, that's the route that you'll pick. You can also view all certified cloud services. Now, as Matt also mentioned, this listing will be published to the DIR webpage. So if the only process that you'll be doing in the system is trying to review the certified vendors and make sure that you're not only looking for contracts with those certified vendors, that will be publicly available. But we also have a link to it here just for ease of use. Then you can view your agency's engagements as well as all active or all StateRAMP engagements. So on the left side, this shows a running count of all certified cloud products. So currently, this is just a sample amount, but these are just what we have in here right now are all of the certified StateRAMP products, but this will also include FedRAMP, and as the process gets going, that will include provisional and everything else. You'll also see here in queue engagements. So in queue engagements mean that the engagement has been picked up. DIR will be conducting either the full assessment or they will be reviewing your sponsorship request or something else. But this is a great way to track where things are on the process. So to kick off the process, we would create a new StateRAMP request. Now, the purpose of having a separate intake form is to ensure that we are not creating duplicate work and duplicate records. As many agencies procure the same products, we don't want to have multiple requests or multiple engagements ultimately for the same product. So this serves as a first initial check. So if you're familiar with the SPECTRIM portal, kind of the basic information where you'll supply your organization, provide a subjective priority, provide an assessment initiation date. If you are looking to launch the official certification assessment, this would be the date that you would prefer that the vendor is notified of their assignment. And then also a target contract start date. So the start date will typically be following a few weeks or months later than the assessment initiation date. DIR will be taking into account the priority as well as start dates and certification levels when prioritizing assessments to be, or requests to be reviewed and assessments to be launched. You can provide any comments supporting your priority or date, and then further down is your general information surrounding the product. So, for example, a word processing and email service. You'll identify the cloud computing category, provide the website, identify the cloud deployment type, and as you hover over, you'll be able to see some help text as well for the definitions that are also provided in the program manual. Product service description will be a more generic description that is typically found on vendor marketing material or vendor website. And then cloud service provider. So as Matt had mentioned, we have pre-populated the third-party profile with roughly 1,000 vendor records. So initially you will search for the third-party profile record, and this search does support query and wildcard searching. So something like micro asterisk will return following. You can also click the show filters to filter directly on something like a DUNS number or alias, legal name, etc. If for some reason the manufacturer is not in the portal, you can click the yes checkbox and then manually submit this information. The other key point here is to identify the cloud service provider contacts that the assessment may be launched to. So these would be the people, potentially sales contacts or technical contacts that would be completing a StateRAMP certification, as well as providing vulnerability reports on an ongoing basis. Again, determining the scoping. So will this end up being a level 1 or a level 2 assessment, or eventually becoming a level 1 or a level 2 assessment? And you can also override that certification. This certification level is calculated based upon the program manual, and if a software tool or cloud service has access to confidential information and it is not low impact, then it is a level 2 assessment. Then certification path. Would you want a StateRAMP assessment conducted by DIR, which will then be the full assessment that has roughly between 300 and 600 questions based on the certification level, or are you requesting provisional status and based upon your agency sponsorship? If StateRAMP assessment is selected and everything's been filled out, then you just have to click the submit request button. If provisional status is selected, then a few more fields will display to request that you describe kind of the methodology behind your agency's risk assessment. Have you conducted a HEC-VAT? Is it agency developed based on the SIG, things like that? When did you review this? We don't want to see things that have been reviewed 6 years ago, as technologies have changed drastically. What is the information resources impact level that your agency specifically has approved? And general overview of the evaluation. So kind of anything else that you've reviewed in addition. And then lastly, significant findings or concerns. This would be something that you would like DIR or other agencies that may also contract with the vendor to be aware of. Please note throughout this, that you should not violate any NDAs that you've conducted with the vendor, but if you find that their encryption strength is not up to your agency standards, you can generically state that or something like that. For additional questions regarding NDAs, please contact your agency's legal counsel. Finally, once everything's been completed here, you can just click the Submit Request button, and this will go into the DIR's assignment queue. They will review the request, either automatically create the engagement and begin the process. They'll return it for resubmission based upon any additional information that's needed, or they may completely deny the request. For example, if someone submits something that is a on-prem software and it is not a cloud service, things like that. But in general, we're hoping that this is, excuse me, a smooth process that just continues down the road. So to view, kind of following that process, viewing existing cloud services that are satisfied, and then also denoting your own agency's engagements here. So to view active certified cloud services, you can click the tile here or the link at the top. View everything that's already been approved. Again, as I mentioned, everything here is kind of your StateRAMP or FedRAMP authorized items already. In the tool, we'll also be generating an official certificate. So just a PDF that you can keep in the procurement file to support that a SPECTRIM certification has been granted. So that will be available here to download. And then if your agency is using this product, you can also link to the SPECTRIM assessment record so that you can view their full certification. So here I've already linked an assessment, but I could also click Add New here. In this engagement record, we're denoting a couple basic things like the third party, your organization. In this case, it's a cloud service engagement type. So then we are asking, is this actually subject to StateRAMP, as there are some types of cloud services that are out of scope due to being low impact SaaS, survey tools, things like that. And if it is subject, selecting the related cloud service product. So this part is key for information security staff who will want to see and review the vendor's submitted StateRAMP assessment. Without linking this cloud service product, you will not be able to view that StateRAMP assessment. We're doing that to keep track of access to that information and kind of have a granularity of knowing who has potentially viewed that vendor's submissions. And as well, you can also document compliance attestation with your organization's security controls. These are all just very subjective, basic views, but if your organization does not use a vendor management, third-party risk management tool today, we're supplying a couple fields that we do intend to enhance as we go. So any feedback we will welcome. Now, so I'm a procurement staff. I can't see the StateRAMP assessments that have been submitted on behalf of the vendor. However, as a security office staff, I can, as long as I have linked that cloud service product. So to do that, I'll switch into my information security office view. And as you can see across the top, I have quite a few more options here. Since I cannot see the StateRAMP, just clicking the ellipsis should bring that up. And in this dropdown, I can access the StateRAMP assessment. Here, I'll look for the engagement that I'm looking for. And I can view the vendor submission. So clicking upon any of these, I can review their full submission information, download their documentation, and as a note in each of the control family sections, we have specific questions based upon each security control. And at the end of each section, we have another question based upon customer responsibility. So I would recommend that agencies who are looking to implement a specific cloud service pay specific attention to these two customer responsibility fields in each, or questions in each section, as they outline any sort of customer responsibility that the vendor or that your agency would need to fully implement the security control. So it looks like we've got a couple questions and chat items in the chat. Let me take a look at those.
Yeah, there's a few in there, Rayne. I think you can answer. There were some centering around the access, and if an existing user would need to request access to the procurement group, or if they need to take any action if they're an existing user. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, thank you. So it depends upon the current user groups that you're assigned to. If you are already in the Information Security Office group in SPECTRIM, you will automatically be granted access to create StateRAMP assessment requests, view StateRAMP assessments, things like that. If you're in the IRM group, you'll be able to create and view all StateRAMP assessment requests and engagements, just not the full vendor submitted assessment. The procurement group is not added by default, but it should not be necessary for anyone that is in the IRM or Information Security Office group. You may want to add the procurement group to general user accounts, but that will be on a case-by-case basis, as some general user accounts are kind of IT support or things like that, or areas like that still may not require procurement access. Procurement will be a new group, mostly for your agency's procurement arm that may not already have any sort of need to be in the SPECTRIM portal.
Yeah, and along that line, there was also a question about how many folks can you assign or create accounts for relating to that? And the answer to that one is essentially as many as you would like. Our licensing will support that, but I would say, consider whether or not somebody actually needs the access or not, because it's just another account to keep up with. But there's no real upper limit on the number of accounts if you wanted. Rayne, for the, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to note that across the top of every screen in the SPECTRIM portal is the support request link. So that's a quick way to request any new accounts to be created. Interesting. That's one way to get new accounts created. And if that popped up with the correct link, you can identify the user, their email addresses, their roles, and we'll intake them and create their accounts. But as Matt mentioned, the SPECTRIM portal is not linked to any Active Directory, so that does require that you follow up on accounts as people change roles or leave an organization.
All right. For the agency request for provisional certification, the sponsorship, is there a location to submit supporting documentation? We are not requesting supporting documentation such as your actual risk assessment results. For that, we're asking more high-level information relating to the risk assessment that you had conducted, but you do not need to submit an actual results or artifacts or things along those lines. With the third-party assessment review of documentation, that's where the supporting documentation is required, and that is typically going to be from the vendor initiated requests for provisional sponsorship instead of the agency initiated requests. So let's see if there are some other ones to answer here. Oh, when will this be made available to all the other folks? So we have moved most of it largely over into the production environment, but we have not changed the visibility of it yet so that folks can go in there. We have a few finishing touches and cleanup to do relating to some fields, and then we anticipate making it available to the users within our instance either late today or tomorrow. Is that correct, Rayne?
Yes.
So this will be made available in the next day, today or tomorrow. And we will also be providing notification through our email list whenever it is fully live, probably beginning Monday. But if you've attended this webinar, it may be available to you at a sooner time. So just to kind of monitor, the influx of folks and make sure that everybody has the appropriate resources to go through this appropriately. So let's see. Yes, so this is a good point. Buyers can use the publicly facing site to check whether or not a given product has a certification. So that's kind of the reasoning for only limiting the user accounts for those that are going to be conducting StateRAMP actions, or if they need to see the queue of assessments that are in process to check whether or not, I guess, a vendor that you're potentially contracting for is in the queue to be assessed and what level they're going to be assessed at. And that kind of ties into another question I saw relating to can you have two certifications, level 1 and level 2? The answer is kind of. If you have a cloud service that has a level 1 certification and then another agency is going to require that at level 2, then we can have the level 2 assessment conducted for that cloud service if they wanted to upgrade their certification, so to speak. Obviously, that's going to be a decision that the vendor has to come to as to whether or not they have the security requirements in place to meet the level 2 certification. But they build upon each other. So level 2 certification contains the requirements of level 1, but there are additional control requirements that are associated with it. All right. Just going through some of these questions. How do we apply for an account on SPECTRIM? So if you're not a current user and you are seeking to get an account, you should coordinate with your information security office of your organization, who is our main point of contact, your information security officer, who can then make a support request to have your account created, or they can email us at GRC. I guess they can email us at TX-RAMP as well. But typically, if somebody has an existing account, they'll know that they can contact us at the GRC mailbox and also use the support request. But any requests, if you're outside of the security office or don't have an existing account, you should funnel those through the appropriate channels, such as your information security office or whoever is responsible for the activities within SPECTRIM for your organization. Okay. Will the DIR site show provisional as well as the certified cloud services? Yes, so provisional certification is still a certification. And again, that is level agnostic. So if a cloud service has a provisional certification, you can use it for whichever purposes your agency deems appropriate. We will post those, but we will post the status or the level of certification along with the actual cloud service itself. So if it's provisional, if it's level 1 or level 2. And then the web page, do we know what the URL is going to be for approved certified cloud services? That is going to be linked to or on the StateRAMP page itself, but that's where it will be created. I don't know what the URL is currently, but we will definitely communicate that information so that it can be checked. Okay. There's some questions around how long it takes to conduct the reviews. So the disclaimer that it's variable, it's going to depend on a few factors. Assessments in themselves are going to be highly dependent on the vendor responsiveness and how quickly the vendor can answer the questionnaire and provide the required documentation. And then the DIR review of the full assessment information is going to take longer than something such as reviewing an agency request for provisional certification or a review of the vendor's third-party assessment or audit documentation, just because of the sheer volume of information that is included within that. And it's quite variable, but depending on how well it's constructed and what the responses are, it's going to range between a couple hours to several hours of actually reviewing all that information. And again, we have hired a contractor to assist us, staff augmentation, who begins on Monday, and they will be fully dedicated to assessing and reviewing all of this information, as well as members of my team and the OCISO office as a whole. So we do know that this is a time-sensitive issue. And then there have been some vendors that have applied for provisional certification using the vendor request for assessment external form outside of Archer. And those are also going to be reviewed and ruled upon, so to speak, or granted the certification prior to the January 1 date for sure. But we needed to stand this up first and foremost so that we can post that information within Archer. So in the coming days and next week, you'll begin to see the certified cloud services on our website, as well as within Archer, beginning with those that are StateRAMP, FedRAMP, and then the provisional ones that have been submitted, and then any of the agency sponsors as they come through. So kind of a long answer to a short question, but I think it's important. That's why also with the request, assessment request, you have the ability to assign your categorical score of how the priority is, from very low to absolutely critical, as well as a target contract start date. So if you wanted to get these assessment requests in there, but it's something that contract that isn't renewed for a year maybe, or the requirements don't go into effect for quite a while, you might want to select that as very low, because we are kind of relying on your priority that you define, as well as what your target dates are to assess the workload and prioritize it appropriately. So I encourage honesty in the request priority field, and that way we can make sure that things are focused on in an appropriate manner. That's not to say that if you mark it as very low, we're not going to assess it for a long period of time. This is also partly on coordination with the vendors and when they're ready to actually complete the assessment itself. So if you just wanted to get it in the system, but you want a target date in the future, you're more than welcome to do that. And then, we can launch it depending on whatever those situations or circumstances dictate. When can you start putting in requests for sponsorship for the cloud services? As soon as the solution is made visible, so in the next day or two. All right.
I do see a note in the chat. How will you identify vendor names that are entered slightly differently but are the same vendor? So that is the whole reason why we're not allowing agencies to add their own vendor profiles, because one person might say AWS, one person might say Amazon Web Services, and the third says Amazon Web Services LLC. So we have this checkbox, and then DIR, because we're quite familiar with the third-party profile and everything that's already in the system, will review this and either associate an existing or create a brand new record if needed.
There's another question in the chat. For the sake of turnover, is there a place where the ISO can see who has access within their organization to Spectrum to clean up, add new users, et cetera?
Yes. So in the ISO home dashboard, or Information Security Office home dashboard, at the bottom of the dashboard, when you scroll all the way down, there's a My Organization's user account listing, and that gives you an idea of usernames, the last login date, Spectrum account status. So inactive user accounts do not receive notifications. They also can't log in. So all of these 2017, 2016 dates, they're unable to log in, as well as their user groups over here. And this is updated nightly.
And can you show them how to export that report? So yes. If they wanted to take it in Excel or something.
Yeah, if you right click on the report itself here and click display report, in this upper right hand corner, you can click the export button and use Excel or PDF if you so choose, and that'll download a copy.
Excellent. Yeah, and if you have trouble finding that, or we only make this available to the Information Security Office group, then you can contact us as well, and we can help you navigate to it. We try to set up the dashboards or the home dashboards accordingly based upon the access groups that folks are members of. So if you're in part of the Information Security Office group, then we assign the Information Security Office home dashboard. So it will likely be this one here. If you're just a general user, most of this stuff is not going to be available. So we assign a different dashboard that does not contain that information. And then along with the IRMs, there's a dashboard focused on the IT related components. There is a question about, will all the products from a vendor be listed in the vendor profile? And the answer to that is yes, the engagements, the StateRAMP engagements, so the cloud services that have been certified for a given provider will be listed in the third party or associated with the third party record. So if you clicked into a third party, you would be able to see the StateRAMP certified cloud services that are associated with that organization.
However, taking with a grain of salt that doesn't include any on-prem products or non-software products as well. But yes, in Cisco, for example, in contracts and engagements, and I may move this around slightly, all of the engagements that are cloud services are here.
There's a question, can you have more than one ISO for an organization? So ISO in the context of Spectrum, we're typically talking about the access group, which is the Information Security Office group. And you can have as many users associated with that group as you'd like. As far as an official designation of an ISO goes, typically that's going to just be one person, as it's a role that is required through statute and rule. In some cases, we've had on our files or records to ISOs more so as contact points, but responsibility for the information security officer role is intended to be for a single point of contact. So clarification on the access groups versus the actual ISO as an information security officer. Okay, so we've got a bit of time. Sorry, there's some questions in the chat versus the QA.
Yes, we will be tracking changes. So things that will qualify as a significant change, we will have a tracking for that. The main thing to be aware of with that is significant changes, DIR may not be aware of those. So we are also relying on the agencies if you find out about something before DIR does certify us.
All right. So again, we have been recording the session, and we will be adding captions to it and making the slides and the recording available once we make everything accessible, and posting that on the StateRAMP webpage. And we will be sending out communications regarding when the solutions, the tools are going to be available. Looks like a lot of these questions are relating to the program itself that I don't want to necessarily address in this webinar, but we'll take those questions, or if you want to follow up through email at tx-ramp@dir.texas.gov, we can answer your questions there. But with that, I think we've about wrapped it up. If there are any other questions relating to Spectrum, please reach out. Again, we'll be making improvements on this as we continue going forward. This is really a big initiative and a big lift, so I appreciate everybody's patience as we go through this. We're really going to get into the assessment and certification piece now that this is largely completed, but we do need to make some cleanup on some of these things, and I think everybody wants us to do that as well. So I appreciate y'all joining us today. Again, the emails are listed tx-ramp@dir.texas.gov. Or reach out to our security inbox, and we'll make sure it gets routed to the right places if you have any questions. So thank you, everybody. Thanks, Rayne. And we're going to get back to work so we can get this all stood up and running. Take care.